Hey everybody, Pat Kirk from Teacup Treasures and Door Decor, and also I'm a member of Wreath Creators and More, doing a revamped tutorial on the single petal flower wreath. I had done one last summer and uploaded it to YouTube, and the quality on it was so poor. And I purchased an Archon mount and I haven't used it yet, and I really intended to use it for Facebook Lives, which I haven't done that yet. So I'm using it to do this updated tutorial so you have a better view than you did of the YouTube tutorial that I did last year. I'm going to start with the very beginning. I had started this tutorial this morning, but something fell on my head and I said like a cuss word, and I didn't want that in the tutorial, so I deleted all of it when I actually only needed to delete that sequence. So unfortunately I'm starting over from the beginning, and I'm gonna go through a couple basics, but then I'm gonna go back to the flower that I actually started this morning. So the first thing I'm gonna do is show you how to use a wood burner if you haven't used it. And I think by this time either most people are using it, or if they aren't using it, they can't use it, and you don't have to use it. But if you want to get a perfect 10-inch by 10-inch square, you're going to start your wood burner, and then you're going to start to hold those two sides apart, and that wood burner will stay in that row. When you're cutting 21-inch mesh, it's a little bit trickier, but as long as you start to split that mesh on both sides, the wood burner will stay in that row, and you'll have a perfect 10 by 10-inch square. It won't be crooked. And I've already cut the squares that I need for this tutorial, but I wanted to cover the wood burner first, just in case you haven't used it or you haven't been introduced to it. It is a hazard. You have to remember, turn it off. Don't let it get close to anything when it's still really hot. It does have an on and off feature, but I totally unplug mine, and I double check and make sure it's unplugged. I have let it melt parts of my cutting mat, and it's fallen on my carpet in my craft room, which is not good. And it got close to my phone cable this morning. So again, even after using it all this time, you don't want any unfortunate accidents to happen. You don't want to get burned by one either. But I still use it. It's my preference for cutting mesh, poly burlap, anything that it will work on. It will work on fabric mesh, but it works best on the real plastic material. Okay, so that's covering the wood burner, and I've showed you that a couple times, so I'm going to unplug that. We're done with that because I've already cut all of my pieces. And for tutorial purposes, I'm using red and black for the colors because they show up more. And I kind of think it'd make a cool flower, that color combination. We'll see. So the next thing you would do, and I'm starting from scratch, but I am going to go back to the flower that I started this morning, is you're going to measure your plastic grid. And on last year's tutorial, I have it going out to the second ring. You can, if you have a large enough piece of plastic grid, you can take it all the way to the outside. And that's what I've been doing, but I'm going to stay true to the tutorial that I did last year. So I'm just marking from the second ring. This is a 14-inch Dollar Tree wreath. If you're going to use a Dollar Tree wreath, please make sure it's not broken in any places before you start to use it. I have come to almost complete a flower wreath, and then found out that one of these rungs was split apart. You can fix it, but you can't sell anything, or I wouldn't sell anything like that. So just make sure that it's none of it's, I usually just kind of by section make sure it's not broken. So now I'm going to cut out the plastic grid. And I usually save these pieces of scrap plastic grid because I'll be able to use them for something else. I don't throw them away. I probably used to throw them away, but I don't anymore. So you take your plastic grid, you turn your wreath form upside down, and for this plastic grid, it has very small holes, so you're gonna have to use, if you have that kind of plastic grid, you're gonna need to use the thinner zip ties to connect it to the wreath form. I prefer the plastic grid that has the larger holes because it's much easier to attach a plastic grid to the wreath form. And I usually use 4 or 5. I attach it in 4 or 5 places. It depends on how it looks. But you want it to reach at least a second ring on your wreath form. And sometimes I use the plastic grid all the way to the outer edges of the wreath form. Just gotta make sure I'm putting it in the right way. I pull them nice and tight, and it looks like it will be fairly even going to the second row. But lately, if I make a flower wreath, I usually I take the plastic grid all the way around because I think it's easier to poke the pipe cleaner through. See these the holes on the plastic grid are so small, it's hard to get a pipe or a zip tie through it. You really gotta use your strength. This piece isn't quite going all the way to the plastic ring, but that's all right. Yep, sometimes I use my teeth. All right, take your wire cutters. I'm gonna snip off those extra. And get those out of the way. Then I've got my glue gun heating up, and I did repaint a half styrofoam ball. So I had another 6-inch ball that I was able to cut in half, and I spray painted it red, which is what my original flower is. So now I'm gonna put some glue on it, but let me get something to put under that grid so it doesn't get on the glass. And I am very generous with the glue. And I usually just eyeball it when I put it on the plastic grid, and it usually comes out to be right in the middle. So you want to press that down. And then for extra reinforcement, I may have glued it to the plate. I use so much glue. For extra reinforcement, you can take these floral pins and just poke them in, you know, maybe 5 or 6, 7 or 8, just for extra reinforcement. Make sure you don't drop these on the floor. My husband has stepped on 1 or 2. I've probably stepped on 1 or 2. And this will all be covered up. When you're done with your wreath, you'll want to cover it with, you can cover it with felt, or I usually just use fleece. I bought a ton of yards last year, and that's what I've been using to cover the backs of my wreath. So that completes attaching the plastic grid to your wreath form, and securing your 1/2 6-inch foam ball, or whatever size center you choose to use. That completes that. I'm going to add a few of the base petals, but then I'm going to go back to the wreath that I started this morning before I deleted that whole sequence of scenes until I swore, and then we'll move on. So like I had said, I'm using black and red for this tutorial because I think those colors show up really well. And I'm going to show you the wreath, the petal fold. And I'll do 4 or 5 of these, and then we'll go back to the wreath that I started this morning because I'm farther along on that one. So your petal fold is, you scrunch corner to corner and you come up with a piece that looks like that, almost like a bow tie. You're going to do the traditional petal fold. So you're going to twist that, and you're going to have 2 fronts. You take a 1/2 a chenille stem, which you can use for the whole flower. You can use just 1/2 a pipe cleaner or chenille stem, 1 twist, and then you're going to put those as close to that foam ball as you can. And when you're doing your petals around the foam ball, you don't want there to be gaps, visible gaps between the petals. Okay, so there's your first petal, and I'll do the fold again. It's, you put it in front of you like a diamond shape, and it's corner to corner. You scrunch it all the way, and you do the petal fold. So you're going to twist like that. So you have your two fronts. Take your half a chenille stem, pull it one twist, and get it as close to the first petal on the grid as you can. Because again, there shouldn't be any gaps around the center of your flower. Sometimes if I go back and I can see like space, I'll go ahead and insert or add another petal. And on the plastic grid, depending on the kind of grid, if you use the wider hold grid, try not to go more than 2 or 3 squares when you're inserting your pipe cleaners. On the smaller squared grid, maybe go 2 or 3 squares. So we'll do that petal fold again, and then I'm gonna switch to the flower that I was working on this morning before I had my accident. So petal fold, put your pipe cleaner in, pull it down nice and tight. One twist. Again, try and get it as close to that foam ball as possible. And then just underneath, do your twist ties a good 4 or 5 times. And then what I showed in the original tutorial is I'm gonna cut that much off, and then I'm gonna bend these pieces over, and we're gonna cover up the back, but that's the way I do it. You can tie them to the other ties that are the other pipe cleaners from the other rows, but I just prefer to cut. You don't wanna cut off where you twisted, but cut off the excess pipe cleaner and bend it over. So that's all I'm gonna do on this one, and I'm going to switch to the flower that I started this morning. I'm a little bit farther along. So I'll hold on just a minute. And this is the one that I started this morning. So as you can see, I'm way farther along, and I didn't really want to start over, but I did want to go over the wood burner and gluing the center of your flower to the grid. And I've always wanted to do a black flower. I don't know why. I think I'm going to do a black rose. You don't see very many of those. See the natural way that when you do that petal fold, since you scrunch it corner to corner, I like that. You can also, if you think it's too puffy, you can lay a wreath on the floor, face up, and put a couple books around it, and that'll flatten it out a little bit. I don't make that call until I'm done with the wreath, because I might want to leave it like this, or I might want a flatter look. So we're going to do some more petal folds, and then I'm going to pause it until I'm finished adding all my pieces around the foam ball. And then when we come back, we'll start on the red on the next row. So again, petal fold. You're going to twist that. And you can feel free to message me with any questions if I'm not making it clear, or if I'm not clear. Please feel free to message me, comment, whatever is easiest for you. I will upload this to YouTube, and I will post it on my page, and I will also post it in Wreath Creators and More. And now I'm going to pause it because you've seen how I do the petal fold and how I get it around the foam circle. So I'm going to pause it here. I'll be back as soon as I finish filling in this space, and then we'll continue on to the next row using the red mesh. Okay, so I have completed the first row of petals around the foam ball, and I love the natural way they curl down because of that petal fold and the way you scrunch the petal. But this is probably a little bit too puffier than I want. So when I've completed the wreath, I may shape it. And the way I do that is I lay the wreath on the floor face up on a flat surface, and I'll put a few books either around the bottom of the petals or on the whole thing. It depends. I do that with every flower wreath I make, but I may leave it like this too because I think it's pretty. So I've completed that, the black petals around the red ball, and I see a few little gaps, and I'll probably go in and add another petal. But I want to move on to the red petals so we can wrap this up. All right, so we're going to do the second row is going to be red petals, and then the third row will be black, and that will finish. I'm not putting leaves on this. I don't think green leaves, I think it would clash with the black and red. I am going to use these on the foam ball, but I'm going to have to come up with a pattern. I'll have to probably watch Michelle from A Noble Touch. She did a tutorial on if you don't cover the whole surface. She did one showing if you're only going to use, if you're only going to cover part of the surface. So I'll need to go back and watch that. I don't know how the red on red will look, but I got these a few weeks ago and I only have 3 boxes. So I'll have to just use what I have and come up with some kind of pattern. Okay, we're going to do the red petals now. I'm still going to use black pipe cleaners or black chenille stems because nobody's going to see those. If I didn't explain it previously, when you do your corner to corner scrunch, you're going to have the natural curl of the mesh downward. Not like this, but down when you do that corner to corner scrunch. I probably don't think I pointed that out. So let's do our corner to corner scrunch. Petal fold, you're twisting that petal, so you're gonna have 2 fronts facing you. It almost looks like a shell. I think I said that in my original tutorial. A red shell with a black pipe cleaner. But nobody's gonna see these. We're gonna cover up the back of the wreath. So I'll do a few of these red ones, and we're gonna put these on, we're gonna add them to the first metal rung on the wreath, on that one. You still got plastic grid there you can anchor them to, but we're gonna move on to that first row. And where I usually start is at a crossbar. That's a good starting point. And all the rest of your rows, you do not need to use as many petals as you used around the foam circle. You can space these a little bit apart. You know, maybe skip 4 or 5 squares, and when you start your contrasting color, you don't need to do right next to each other like you did with these. So I'm going to do that fold a few times with the red, and then I'm going to pause it, and we'll come back and add the last row. So again, the natural curl of the mesh face down, corner to corner scrunch, petal fold, pipe cleaner, chenille stem. I just pull it down as far as I can. I don't run my hands up and down the whole petal because it's more likely to fray. And even using a wood burner, you're going to get a few strings. So I'm going to space this one. I'm going about that far from the first petal because we don't need to cover the entire row. Although you still don't want your pipe cleaner for that petal to be more than a couple squares apart. I may not have put that in right. So that's how far apart I did the first two red petals. And what I was saying is, I snip off the part that's not twisted and bend these over. And they are sharp, so you definitely want to cover your wreath. I mean the back of your wreath. Just be careful not to cut off the part where you twist it or your petal's going to come out. So I still leave a good bit. Then I just fold them over. And I usually leave it, I usually don't do that until I've completed an entire row. So quiet. Husband headed to Wilmington, North Carolina. I'll be there till tomorrow. It's hot outside. Nasty hot. So I don't know, I hope you can see how I'm doing this. Again, I'm leaving a good part of the twisted tie, and I'm just going to bend those over. And you can either cover up the back of your wreath with a piece of felt. I cover mine with fleece because I bought like 100 yards of it last year to cover the backs of my trees and other wreaths. So I just bend those pieces over. And they shouldn't get in your way. And these I'll just finish after I'm done adding the red petals. So you can still see the red peeking out from under the black. I just like the way it naturally folds under. But for the most part, the flower wreaths that I make, I use the petal fold from Michelle from A Noble Touch. I use her petal fold, but I still do single petals. I haven't used double petals in a long time. So I'm going to do a few more of these, and then I'm going to pause it until we're done with the red row, and then I'll restart it. I think you got the petal fold down. And I know somebody already started on hers, and it looked awesome. I'll do a couple more red. And you just kind of got to play with it when you're done Make sure they're all, you know, they're not hung up. Mesh does like to stick to itself. So a lot of people don't like working with it. I like working with it. But lately I've been making a lot of poly burlap sunflowers in different colors, which is a nice change. But I'm running low on that like everybody else. And I'm waiting for Craft Outlet to get theirs back in stock. So again, I'm going to that first ring, and there's still plastic grid there, so I'm just poking the pipe cleaner through the plastic grid. And I'm not going to be as generous with the red petals as I am with this layer. I'm going to space them apart. And I'll do that on the third layer or the last layer of black petals too. Just, you don't have to put that many. You just want to, you can do your flower all in the same color. I've done a solid white one with, well, I did green petals, so I guess it wasn't solid white. But you can do one color. Around Christmas, I did a coral with gold in this style. I did a, what else did I do in this style? I haven't made one of these in forever. I did the first tutorial and it wasn't a good one, but I didn't really see where a lot of people made these. And there are so many flower tutorials out there. I just didn't think it was a very big hit. And it still may not be, but it gives you another option. All right, I am going to pause it here. I'm going to finish this row of red petals. I like it. I like the red and black. I think it's sassy. And then once I add the Lomi pins in there, I think I'm going to like it. Shape it up a little bit. So let me pause it here. I'll finish the red and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I am back. I have finished the second row of red petals, and while I was paused, I hopped on over to a Noble Touch to see how she does her partial bling centers, and so I'll be able to do that. But this is, I didn't count how many petals I used, but you see how I spaced them farther apart than these around the foam circle. So we'll move on to the third row of black, and I think I decided to go ahead and do a fourth row of red because I have enough petals to do another row. So I'm snipping these off. I'm gonna bend them down. And again, if you do this like this, make sure you're not cutting off the twisted part so your petals don't come out. I think I already mentioned that, but I probably should use my wire cutters when I'm doing this, but I just grab my scissors. So we're talking about when you move out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, There are 23 petals on the second row. The red petals, there's 23. And I would guess that there's probably 30 to 35 around the foam ball. Just bend those down so they're not in your way. Okay, so you can see how the layer of red petals looks. And I like that puffy look. I don't know if I'm gonna leave it like that or if I'm gonna flatten a little bit. When I'm done with the wreath, then I'll decide. So we're back to the black petals. I will do the petal fold a few times, then I will pause it and finish that row. And I'll see if I add another row of red, since I have enough petals cut. And I'll do the same with the black. I'm gonna space these out and use probably the same number as I did the red. Okay, so the natural curl side down, scrunch corner to corner, do the petal fold. And we're gonna add these to the second ring of the wreath. This ring right here. And you may be able to poke it through the plastic grid, or you can just add it to the ring and twist it. So I'm gonna try for 23 black petals, just to be consistent with the second row of petals. And if you come across any strings, and you will still have strings here and there, just snip them off, trim them off. Corner to corner. Probably don't need to show you this anymore. And we're moving on to the second ring in the wreath. Give it 4 or 5 good twists. And now you can see how the 3 layers look with your first black, red, black. So I think it looks pretty. We'll see. And also, while I was on A Noble Touches, while she was showing the partial bling center, she said she sprays her wreaths with Krylon. She uses a high gloss. She said be sure and spray your wreath before you add the gems. If you're going to use Lomi gems or glass gems or whatever, spray your wreath before you add those, because it will add a dull sheen to the gems or whatever you decide to use in the middle. You just want to spray the mesh. I'll do this a couple more times and pause it until I finish the third row. And if any of you have not heard of the Archon mount, I bought it. I was in She's Crafty 2 Club, and Nicole, she partnered up with Archon, and I got 20% off on the Archon phone, the camera holder. I'm using my iPhone. It's an overhead. It has a heavy base, and then I bought the tablet holder, so when I do lives, then I can see people's comments. I just need to get brave and do a live. And the thing about the Archon mount is you still won't see my face, which I really like that part. But I still am kind of shy about doing a live, but I know I need to drive traffic to my page, that it helps. I'm just not sure what there is that I could do. I can show people how I make my base for my wreaths, because I do them all the same, which would be kind of boring. I just did buy a bow tutorial, and I have the original Pro Bow, the hand, and I want to get the big deluxe model. There are so many things you can do with those bow makers, and I won't say where I got it from just for purposes of, I probably shouldn't. I will for my own page, but it has this individual that I got a bow tutorial from said the Pro Bow, the hand, has literally changed her life. And that's a big shout out to Regina, the brainchild behind the Pro Bow. The only problem is I can't find the deluxe model. I went directly to Pro Bow website, and they're out of the Ultimate and the Deluxe. So that's kind of a problem. But I have the original one, and you can still do pretty decent bows on that one. But I'd like to get that big fancy one. Because most of the time, I just grab the Bodabra, and you can do nice bows, but you're going to get a whole lot better bow on the Bodabra. You just are. I mean, I like my Bodabra bows too, but I gotta pull out that Pro Bow and start using it. I did buy the fluff box. But after seeing this person's bows, and she made a bow, it's named after her. It's not the Terry bow. I thought, I gotta do this. I just gotta pull the trigger and pull out the Pro Bow and start using it. I bought 2 of them, and I actually sold one to a friend of mine, and then I turned around and bought one right away to replace that one. And I think the Terry bow is like awesome for if you just have a little bit of ribbon left. That's what you use that ribbon for, is the Terry bow. So once you get to where you're adding your petals and you don't have any plastic grid, I just take the ends of the pipe cleaner and wrap them around the ring right here. I wrap them around multiple times because now I don't have plastic grid to poke the pipe cleaners through. That's why I like to use a plastic grid all the way to the outside of the wreath form now. So it's going to take me a little bit longer to finish this 3rd row since I got to wrap those pipe cleaners. So I'm going to pause it here, and then we'll come back when I'm done with the 3rd row of black petals, and we'll be almost finished. So you can see how it looks with the third layer going on. Okay, and I'm going to pause it here, and I'll be right back. Okay, so welcome back. I finished the 3rd layer of black petals, and if I do a 4th layer with the red, I'll do that after the tutorial. We don't need to stick around for that. but I went ahead and did the Lomi gems, and I did them in clear because the red didn't even show up on the red. So I don't even know why I was thinking that. But I did spray the wreath with the Krylon spray, the high gloss, before I added these, as Michelle from A Noble Touch, her advice or her recommendation. So this is a partial bling center. Thank you, Michelle Noble. And I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Leave any comments. I will post it on YouTube, on my Facebook page, and I will post it in Wreath Creators and More. I hope that this is much more helpful than the original tutorial. Thank you.